Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Michael stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the 10th time that morning. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed down the silk material, a birthday gift from Linda 3 years ago. The morning sun filtered through the expensive curtains she'd insisted on buying last spring, casting shadows across his face that seemed to emphasize the dark circles under his eyes. 10 years of marriage had led to this moment, this carefully orchestrated day of reckoning, that he glanced at the bedside table, where a framed photo caught the morning light. It showed their family at the beach last summer, Linda radiant in her designer swimsuit, the children building sandcastles, and him wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Even then, he'd suspected something was wrong. But the truth had proved far more devastating than his worst fears. The master bedroom around him was immaculate, every surface polished to perfection, Linda's doing, of course. The cleaning service she'd hired came twice a week, another unnecessary expense she'd insisted upon. "We need to maintain certain standards, Michael," she'd said, her voice taking on that condescending tone he'd grown to recognize as manipulation. "What would people think if they dropped by and saw dust on the furniture?" From downstairs came the sounds of breakfast being prepared, the soft clinking of expensive china, another of Linda's must-have purchases, mixed with the children's voices. His heart clenched at the thought of Emma and Jack. How could he have been so blind? The signs had been there all along. Michael pulled open his drawer, reaching beneath his socks to retrieve a manila envelope. Inside were the DNA test results he'd received 3 weeks ago. He still remembered the day he'd secretly swabbed the children's cheeks, telling them it was a game about science. The lab had called with the results while he was at work, and he'd had to excuse himself from a meeting because his hands were shaking too badly to hold his pen. "Daddy!" Emma's voice carried up the stairs, followed by the patter of small feet. "Mom wants to know if you're ready." Michael quickly tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket, smoothing it flat against his chest. "I'll be right down, sweetheart," he called back, impressed by how steady his voice sounded despite the turmoil churning inside him. That he took one final look in the mirror, straightening his shoulders. The man staring back at him looked older than his 38 years, with new lines etched around his mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and bitter revelations. But his eyes held something new today. Determination. The hallway leading to the stairs was lined with family photos, each one carefully selected and arranged by Linda to present the perfect image of family life. Michael paused at each one now, seeing them with new eyes. The Christmas photo, where Linda wore the diamond necklace she claimed was a gift from her parents. He now knew John had bought it for her. The vacation snapshot from their trip to Hawaii, where she'd disappeared for hours claiming she needed time alone to recharge. She'd been meeting John there too. He discovered the sound of Linda's laughter drifted up from downstairs, that musical sound that had once made his heart skip a beat. Now it sent a chill down his spine. As he descended the stairs, the scent of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. Linda always insisted on getting them from the expensive French bakery across town. The kitchen scene that greeted him was picture perfect, like something out of a magazine spread. Linda stood at the island counter, her blonde hair falling in elegant waves around her shoulders as she arranged fresh flowers in a crystal vase, another expensive purchase she'd insisted they needed. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, the material clinging to her curves in a way that was both elegant and subtly provocative. "There you are, darling." Linda's smile was radiant as she turned to face him. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost up there." She crossed the room with fluid grace, reaching up to straighten his tie with practiced familiarity. Her perfume, the same expensive brand she'd worn for years, wrapped around him like a suffocating cloud. "The caterers will be here at 4, and the first guest should arrive by 6. I've arranged everything perfectly." Michael watched her movements, noting the subtle signs he'd learned to read over the years, the slight tightening around her eyes when she lied, the way her fingers lingered just a fraction too long on his chest, the calculated tilt of her head that she used when she wanted something. How had he missed these signs for so long? "You've outdone yourself," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "As always." Linda beamed, clearly missing the edge in his tone. Well, it is our 10-year anniversary. Everything has to be perfect. She turned back to the flowers, adjusting a rose with precise movements. I hired that new florist from Madison Avenue, the one all the society wives are using. A bit more expensive, but worth every penny, don't you think? Michael's jaw tightened at her casual mention of expense. How many times had she pushed for more expensive options, insisting they needed to maintain appearances? The country club membership, the luxury car, the endless home improvements, all part of her carefully constructed facade. Emma and Jack sat at the breakfast table, both absorbed in their tablets, the latest models, of course, because Linda insisted they needed to keep up with their peers. Michael looked at them, really looked at them, and felt the familiar stab of pain. Jack's nose, Emma's chin, features that matched neither his nor Linda's. But now he knew exactly whose they resembled. "Kids, time to get ready for school," Linda announced, clapping her hands together. "We have a big night ahead of us, and I need you both looking perfect for the party." "Yes, Mom," they chorused, sliding off their chairs with practiced obedience that as they passed by. Michael reached out to ruffle Jack's hair, his heart clenching when the boy ducked away with a giggle. Blood or not, he'd loved these children as his own for years. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd ever imagined possible. "Oh, before I forget," Linda said, gathering her designer purse from the counter. "The florist called, and apparently there's some issue with the centerpieces I ordered. Can you believe it? On today of all days?" She rolled her eyes dramatically. "I need to run over there and sort it out personally." Michael watched as she checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, applying a fresh coat of lipstick with practiced precision. "Where are you really going, Linda?" he asked quietly. She froze for a fraction of a second before turning to face him, her smile never wavering. "What do you mean, darling? The florist is on Madison Avenue. You know that, right?" "The florist." Michael nodded, keeping his voice neutral. "Give John my regards when you see him." The flash of panic in her eyes was gone so quickly, he might have missed it if he hadn't been watching for it. Her recovery was impressive. It always had been. "John? The florist's name is David, silly. Are you feeling all right?" She approached him with concern etched on her features. Reaching up to feel his forehead, Michael caught her wrist before she could touch him, holding it firmly, but not tight enough to hurt. "Don't," he said simply, releasing her hand when she pulled back. Linda's expression shifted subtly, concern replacing the momentary flash of fear. "Michael, you're acting strange," she said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she wanted to make him doubt himself. "Is work stressing you out again? Maybe you should talk to Dr. Peterson about adjusting your medication." The manipulation was so obvious now that he knew what to look for. How many times had she used this technique, making him question his own sanity when he got too close to the truth? "I'm fine, Linda. Better than I've been in years, actually. Have fun at the florist?" She studied him for a moment longer before gathering her things. "We'll talk about this later, darling. Try to rest before the party. I need you in top form tonight." The front door closed behind her with a soft click, and Michael waited until he heard her car pull out of the driveway before moving to the window. As expected, she turned left instead of right, the opposite direction from the florist she claimed to be visiting. Michael pulled out his phone, checking the tracking app he'd installed weeks ago. The little that represented Linda's car moved steadily across the screen, heading toward the wealthy subdivision where John Matthews lived in his bachelor pad. His hands clenched around the phone as he watched the dot come to a stop at the familiar address. Opening another app, he activated the recording device he'd planted in Linda's car last week. The memory of installing it flashed through his mind. Waiting until she was asleep, sneaking out to the garage in the dead of night, his hands sweating as he carefully placed the tiny device under her dashboard. The audio came through clearly now. "John, it's me. Let me in quickly. I don't want the neighbors to see my car. Getting paranoid, beautiful." John's voice was smooth, confident. The sound of it made Michael's stomach turn. "Don't worry. Everyone thinks you're the perfect wife. Nobody suspects a thing." Michael was acting weird this morning. "He mentioned your name?" A pause. "What exactly did he say?" "He told me to give you his regards." "There's no way he knows anything, right? We've been so careful." "Relax, baby. Everything's going according to plan. Once the insurance policy clears next month, we'll never have to sneak around again. You'll be a wealthy widow, free to do whatever you want." Michael stopped the recording, his hand shaking with suppressed rage. He walked to his home office, each step measured and controlled despite the fury burning inside him. The room was his sanctuary, the one place Linda rarely entered. Too boring, she'd always said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Now he was grateful for her disinterest, that he sat at his desk, pulling out a thick folder from the hidden compartment he'd installed behind the filing cabinet. Inside was the evidence he'd collected over the past 3 months, each piece carefully documented and organized. The first photos from the private investigator showed Linda entering John's house, timestamp clearly visible. 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon when she was supposed to be at her yoga class. Mr. Walker, the investigator had said during their first meeting, "Are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance is bliss." But Michael had known he couldn't live with doubts anymore. The signs had been accumulating. Mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room, unexplained charges on their credit cards, Linda's increasing demands for him to increase his life insurance coverage, but he spread the bank statements across his desk, tracing the pattern of transfers he'd uncovered. Linda had been clever, but not clever enough. Small amounts moved between accounts, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic notifications. The offshore account he'd discovered last week was the final piece of that puzzle. The DNA test results lay on top of the pile, the clinical language stark against the white paper. Probability of paternity, 0%. He remembered the day he decided to get the test done. It had been after finding an old photo album, seeing Jack's baby pictures next to his own. The differences he'd always dismissed suddenly seemed glaring. His phone buzzed a text from the security company he'd hired for tonight's party. Everything was in place. The plainclothes officers would arrive disguised as catering staff, ready to move when he gave the signal. He'd spared no expense on security, knowing John's tendency toward violence when cornered. The police would be waiting outside, already briefed on the situation that a child's laughter from the backyard drew his attention. Through the window, he could see Emma pushing Jack on the swing set. His throat tightened. Despite everything, they were innocent in all this. He'd made sure the officers knew to keep the arrest quiet, to wait until the children were upstairs before moving in. The sound of a car door closing snapped him back to the present. Linda was home. Her florist visit apparently concluded. Michael quickly secured the evidence back in its hiding place. Listening to her heels clicking on the marble floor she'd insisted they install last year. "Darling?" Her voice carried up the stairs. The florist sorted everything out. "The centerpieces will be perfect." Michael emerged from his office, watching her hang up her coat. There was a slight smudge of lipstick on her collar, careless. She'd never been careless before. Was she getting cocky, or just distracted by their plans? "Wonderful," he replied, his voice steady. "Wouldn't want anything to spoil our perfect evening." Linda beamed at him, but he caught the calculating look in her eyes. "I need to start getting ready. The makeup artist will be here in an hour." She paused, studying his face. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? You seem tense." "Just excited about tonight," Michael said, managing a smile. "It's not every day we celebrate 10 years of marriage." "And many more to come," Linda replied, stretching up to kiss his cheek. Her perfume had changed. She must have reapplied it at John's. Another small detail she'd overlooked that as she disappeared upstairs, Michael checked his phone again. The security team had confirmed their positions. The video evidence was queued up and ready. The police were on standby. Everything was in place for tonight's performance. That he walked to the living room, where workers were already setting up for the party. Linda had spared no expense on crystal champagne flutes, gold-rimmed plates, elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than some people's monthly rent. She'd always had expensive tastes, but now he understood why she never seemed concerned about the cost. She hadn't planned on him being around to pay the bills much longer. "Mr. Walker," one of the caterers, actually an undercover officer, approached him. "Where would you like us to set up the audio-visual equipment?" Michael pointed to the far corner of the room. "There. Make sure the screen is visible from everywhere in the room." He'd chosen the location carefully, wanting everyone to have a clear view. When he played the video that would shatter Linda's carefully constructed facade, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the expensive hardwood floors as Michael watched the party preparations unfold. Each detail Linda had obsessed over, Each expensive addition to their perfect celebration would serve as backdrop to her downfall. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed again, a text from John's security detail. Subject has left his house. Heading to gym, as per usual schedule. Michael checked his watch. 2 hours until the party. 2 hours until he exposed 10 years of lies. 2 hours until he revealed the true face of the woman he'd married. In the kitchen, staff bustled about preparing hors d'oeuvres that Linda had specifically chosen to impress her social circle. The champagne she'd selected cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. Every detail designed to showcase their perfect life, their perfect marriage perfect. The word had lost all meaning. How many times had Linda used it? Perfect house, perfect family, perfect life. Tonight, her pursuit of perfection would be her undoing. Michael touched the envelope in his pocket, feeling the weight of the evidence it contained. Yes, everything would be perfect tonight, just not in the way Linda had planned. The late afternoon sun cast golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows Linda had insisted on installing last year. Michael stood in the foyer, watching as the first guests began to arrive. Each ring of the doorbell felt like another tick of a countdown clock, moving inexorably toward the moment of truth. Linda floated down the stairs in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The deep blue material shimmered as she moved, making her appear almost ethereal. Her hair and makeup were flawless. She'd spent 3 hours with her glam team getting ready. The perfect wife, preparing for her perfect party. "Darling, the Hendersons are here," Linda called out, opening the door with practiced grace. "Barbara, Robert, you look wonderful." Barbara Henderson air-kissed Linda's cheeks, exclaiming over her dress. "You always look absolutely stunning, Linda. I don't know how you do it." "Oh, this old thing?" Linda laughed, the sound like tinkling crystal. "I just threw it on." Another lie. Michael had seen the credit card statement for the dress. $6,000. Charged to the account she thought he didn't know about. Robert Henderson shook Michael's hand firmly. 10 years, eh? Don't know how you managed it, old boy. My first marriage barely made it to 5. He winked, clearly expecting Michael to laugh along. "Yes, Linda's quite unique," Michael replied, watching as his wife expertly guided the Hendersons toward the bar. She'd arranged everything strategically. The bar positioned to encourage mingling, the seating arranged to showcase their expensive furniture, the lighting perfectly adjusted to flatter everyone in the room. More guests arrived in steady succession. Linda's college friends, his colleagues from the firm, their neighbors from the country club. Each arrival followed the same pattern. Effusive greetings, compliments on the house, comments about what a perfect couple they made. Michael felt like he was watching a play where everyone but him had memorized their lines. "The catering is divine, Linda," Margaret Wilson gushed, sampling one of the elaborate hors d'oeuvres. "You simply must give me the name of your caterer." Linda preened under the attention. "I'll have my assistant send you their information. Though I should warn you, they're not cheap. But then, quality never is, right, darling?" She directed this last comment at Michael, her eyes glinting with something that might have been challenge. "No expense spared for our special day," Michael agreed, raising his glass in a mock toast. Only he caught the slight narrowing of Linda's eyes, the momentary tension in her perfectly maintained smile. The children made their appearance briefly, paraded out in their carefully selected outfits before being whisked away upstairs by the nanny Linda had hired specially for the evening. Another unnecessary expense, but Linda had insisted they needed to present the right image. "Such beautiful children," Barbara Henderson sighed. "They look just like their mother." Michael took a long sip of his whiskey to hide his reaction. If only Barbara knew how right she was. Though not in the way she meant, the party was in full swing when John Matthews made his entrance. He arrived fashionably late, of course, dressed in an expertly tailored suit that showcased his athletic build. Michael watched as John worked the room, playing the role of successful businessman and family friend with practiced ease. "Michael," John called out, approaching with confident strides. "Congratulations on 10 years, man. That's quite an achievement." He clapped Michael on the shoulder, his grip just slightly too firm to be friendly. "Thank you, John. So glad you could make it." Michael met his gaze steadily. "I know how busy you must be. What with all your business meetings?" Something flickered in John's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. But his smile never wavered. Never too busy to celebrate with good friends. Linda outdid herself with this party. Yes, she's always been good at putting on a show. Michael's voice carried just enough edge to make John's smile falter slightly across the room. Linda was holding court among her friends, laughing at something Barbara Henderson had said. She was in her element, the perfect hostess in her perfect home, surrounded by the trappings of the life she'd built on lies. Her eyes darted occasionally to John. The glances so quick most people would miss them. Michael checked his phone discreetly. The undercover officers positioned around the room had sent their confirmations everything was in place. The tech team had set up the audiovisual equipment exactly as he'd specified, disguising it as part of the anniversary celebration preparations that Linda's sister Caroline approached, already slightly tipsy from the expensive champagne. "Michael, darling, when are you giving your speech? Everyone's dying to hear what you'll say about our wonderful Linda." "Soon," Michael promised, watching as Linda's head turned slightly at Caroline's words. "I've been working on it for quite a while. Wouldn't want to disappoint anyone." The string quartet Linda had hired began playing a new piece, the music filling the room with elegant ambience. More perfect window dressing for her perfect facade. Michael remembered when she'd first suggested hiring them. "All the best anniversaries have live music, darling. We want people to remember this night." "Oh, they'll remember it all right," Michael thought, checking his watch. The police outside had confirmed their positions. The evidence was ready. All the players were in place for the final act of Linda's performance that he watched as she navigated the room, touching arms, laughing at jokes, playing the consummate hostess. John had positioned himself carefully close enough to maintain his role as family friend, far enough to avoid suspicion. They'd probably practiced this dance countless times at other social events. Perfecting their act of casual acquaintance, Linda caught his eye across the room and raised her glass in a subtle toast. Her smile was radiant, confident. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. "Time for speeches," Caroline announced suddenly, her voice carrying over the music. "Linda, darling, you go first." Michael watched as his wife made her way to the center of the room, every movement calculated for maximum effect. The crystal champagne glass in her hand caught the light, throwing rainbow patterns on the wall behind her. She'd positioned herself perfectly. She always did, with the elegant backdrop of their home framing her like a portrait. "First," Linda began, her voice rich with emotion that Michael now knew was completely fabricated. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with us tonight. 10 years ago, I married the most wonderful man." Michael let her continue, watching as she wove her web of lies with practiced skill. Each word, each gesture, each perfectly timed pause, all part of her performance. But this would be her final show. In a few minutes, he would take the stage, and the true story would finally be told. His phone buzzed quietly in his pocket, the final confirmation from the police outside. Everything was ready. As Linda finished her speech to enthusiastic applause, Michael stepped forward. The moment of truth had arrived. The applause for Linda's speech echoed through the room as Michael stepped forward, his footsteps heavy with purpose. The weight of the envelope in his jacket pocket seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. Linda's perfectly painted lips curved into an encouraging smile as she held out the microphone to him, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to shatter. 10 years, Michael began, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. He paused, looking around at the gathered faces, friends, family, colleagues, all of them deceived by the elaborate illusion Linda had created. 10 years of memories, 10 years of moments, 10 years of lies. The last word hung in the air like smoke. Linda's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, her eyes widening slightly. In the corner, John shifted his weight, his casual stance becoming noticeably tense. "Michael?" Linda's voice held just the right note of concerned confusion. Always the performer. "Darling, what are you talking about?" "Would anyone like to guess?" Michael continued, his voice taking on an edge that made several guests exchange uncomfortable glances. "How long my wife has been sleeping with John Matthews." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Linda's crystal champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the expensive hardwood floor she'd insisted on having installed last summer. The sound of breaking glass seemed to punctuate the moment perfectly. "Michael," she exclaimed, her voice hitting that perfect note of shocked innocence. "What are you talking about? Have you been drinking?" She moved toward him, concern painted on her features, but he held up a hand to stop her. 3 years. He answered his own question, pulling out the envelope with deliberate slowness. 3 years of sneaking around, plotting, planning. Planning what, you ask? He looked directly at John, who had gone pale beneath his expensive tan. "Planning my murder." More gasps rippled through the crowd. Linda's sister Caroline clutched her chest dramatically, while Barbara Henderson gripped her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles went white. "Michael, you're not well," Linda said, moving toward him with practiced concern on her features. "Let's talk about this privately. You're embarrassing yourself." "No more private talks, Linda. No more manipulation. No more lies." He held up the DNA test results. "Would you like to explain why neither Emma nor Jack share my DNA? Or shall I ask John about that?" The color drained from Linda's face. For once, her perfect mask slipped, showing the calculating woman beneath. "You're making a scene," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Think about the children." "The children?" Michael laughed harshly, the sound devoid of any humor. "Now you care about the children? Was it caring about them when you and John planned to murder their supposed father for insurance money?" John made a sudden move toward the door, but 2 of the undercover officers posing as catering staff smoothly stepped into his path. "Going somewhere, John?" Michael asked. "I wouldn't leave just yet. The police outside are very interested in the recording I have of you two discussing your murder plans." As if on cue, the front door burst open, and uniformed officers streamed in. John tried to shove past the security team, but was quickly subdued and handcuffed. Linda stood frozen in the center of the room, her perfect world crumbling around her. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. The mask was cracking, revealing glimpses of the true Linda beneath. Michael smiled grimly and pulled out his phone. "Actually, I can." He pressed play, and Linda's voice filled the room. "Once he's gone, we'll have everything, John. The insurance money, the house, freedom. No one will ever know it wasn't an accident. You've thought of everything, haven't you, beautiful? That's why I love you." The recording continued, detailing their plans in damning clarity. Linda's voice discussed timing, methods, alibis, all with the same attention to detail she'd used to plan this very party. The guests listened in horrified silence as the perfect wife revealed her true nature through her own words. "The children will be better off," Linda's recorded voice continued. "They'll have both of us, their real parents, and enough money to never want for anything." The revelation of the children's parentage caused another wave of shocked murmurs through the crowd. Barbara Henderson's hand flew to her mouth, her earlier comment about the children looking like their mother taking on a whole new meaning that Linda's mask finally shattered completely, replaced by a look of pure hatred. Her beautiful features twisted into something ugly and foreign. "You bastard," she spat, all pretense of the perfect wife gone. "You think you've won? You've destroyed everything." "No, Linda," Michael replied calmly. "You destroyed everything. I just exposed the truth." As the police led John away in handcuffs, Linda stood alone in the midst of their ruined anniversary party. Former friends and family members backed away from her as if she were contagious. The string quartet had stopped playing, the silence broken only by the murmurs of shocked guests and the sound of police radios. Michael watched it all with a sense of grim satisfaction. The truth had finally come out, and with it, the illusion of perfection had been shattered forever. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a cold certainty that justice had been served. "Michael, please." Linda's voice had lost its musical quality, becoming shrill and desperate. "We could talk about this. Think about the children. Think about our life together." He turned to face her one final time, looking at the woman he had once loved, now revealed in all her manipulative glory. The expensive dress, the perfect makeup, the carefully styled hair, all of it seemed grotesque now, like a beautiful mask covering something rotten. "Goodbye, Linda," he said simply. "I hope it was worth it." With that, he walked out, leaving behind 10 years of lies and the woman who had orchestrated them all. The night air felt clean and fresh in his lungs as he stepped outside. Free at last from the weight of deception that had surrounded him for so long. Behind him, he could hear Linda's sobs, but they held no power over him anymore. He had survived her betrayal, exposed her lies, and emerged stronger. As he drove away from the house that had been both home and prison, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace, the perfect life, had been an illusion, but the truth, as painful as it was, had set him free. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mansion's driveway as Michael supervised the final preparations for the anniversary celebration. His conversation with the head of security, a former police detective named James Reynolds, was terse and focused. "We've got plainclothes officers positioned at every exit," Reynolds reported, his voice low and professional. "Team A is disguised as catering staff. Team B is party guests. Nobody moves until your signal." Michael nodded, checking his watch. "And Linda's movements?" "She's been at the spa since noon. Our surveillance team confirms she's getting the full treatment: hair, nails, makeup. Playing the perfect wife right up to the end." "And John?" "At his office, making calls. Seems nervous. He's changed his suit 3 times today." A catering van pulled up, and Michael watched as genuine staff began unloading equipment alongside the undercover officers. The contrast was stark. The real servers focused on their tasks, unaware they were working alongside law enforcement. "Mr. Walker," one of the actual caterers approached, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Walker left specific instructions about the champagne service. "She wants the Dom Perignon served first, then." "Follow her instructions to the letter," Michael interrupted. "Everything needs to appear perfect." "That's what she wants? That's what she'll get." The caterer nodded and hurried away. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "You're really going all out on this?" "Linda's always insisted on perfection," Michael replied, his voice hard. "Tonight, she'll get a perfect revelation of every lie she's told." The sound of expensive tires on gravel announced another arrival. A sleek black BMW pulled up, and John Matthews stepped out, adjusting his Italian suit with practiced casualness. Michael's jaw tightened as his wife's lover approached, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Michael," John called out, his voice jovial. "Quite the setup you've got here. Linda's really outdone herself this time." "John?" Michael met his gaze steadily. "Interesting choice of car. New, isn't it?" A flicker of unease crossed John's face. "Just picked it up last week. End of quarter bonus, you know how it is." "Of course. Nothing to do with the offshore account you opened last month?" The color drained from John's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." Michael stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Strange. I have documents that say otherwise. The same account Linda's been transferring money into." "My money?" John's confident facade cracked slightly. "Look, Michael, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Save it for your lawyer." Michael cut him off. "You'll need one soon enough." Before John could respond, Linda's voice rang out from the house entrance. "John, you're early." She descended the steps gracefully, every detail of her appearance calculated for maximum effect. "Michael, darling, why didn't you tell me our guests were arriving?" She reached them, the expensive perfume she wore creating an almost visible aura around her. Her smile was brilliant, practiced, and completely fake. "John was just admiring the setup," Michael said smoothly. "Telling me how you've outdone yourself." "Well, it's not every day we celebrate 10 years of marriage," Linda purred, her hand resting possessively on Michael's arm. "Everything has to be perfect." "Perfect," Michael echoed, watching as John shifted uncomfortably. "That's exactly what I was thinking. Every detail, every moment, every revelation perfect." Linda's fingers tightened slightly on his arm. "Darling, you're acting strange again. Are you sure you don't want to lie down before the party?" "I've never been more clear-headed," Michael replied, removing her hand from his arm. "By the way, how was the spa?" "Much more relaxing than meeting John at his house this morning, I imagine." The mask slipped for just a fraction of a second before Linda recovered. "The spa? Oh, you must be confused, darling. I was at the florist this morning, remember?" "Right, the florist. Michael pulled out his phone, showing her the GPS tracking data. Funny how the florist's address matches John's house exactly. The color drained from Linda's face, but her recovery was quick. She laughed, the sound brittle. Michael, have you been drinking? You're not making any sense. She turned to John, her voice honey-sweet. John, I'm so sorry about this. Michael's been under a lot of stress lately. Has he? John attempted to play along, but his voice cracked slightly. Maybe he should. Maybe I should what? Michael interrupted. Take the sleeping pills Linda's been increasing the dosage of? The ones she hoped would make it easier to stage my accident? Linda's perfect composure faltered. Michael, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Think about the children. The children? Michael's laugh was harsh. You mean John's children? The ones you've been passing off as mine for years. John took an involuntary step backward. I should go. Stay. Michael's command froze him in place. You won't want to miss tonight's entertainment. I've got quite a show planned. Linda's eyes darted between the two men, her brilliant mind clearly working overtime to salvage the situation. Michael, you're clearly unwell. We should cancel the party. Get you some help. Cancel your perfect party? Never. Michael's smile was cold. I wouldn't dream of ruining the celebration you've worked so hard to prepare. Every guest you've invited, every person you've fooled over the years, they all deserve to be here for the grand finale. The sound of more cars arriving broke the tension. Linda's face settled back into its practiced smile, though her eyes remained wary. We'll discuss this later, she hissed through clenched teeth. Don't you dare ruin this night. Wouldn't dream of it, Michael replied. I've got everything planned. Perfect, just the way you like it. He watched as Linda turned to greet the arriving guests, her mask firmly back in place. John stood awkwardly for a moment before moving away, his confident stride notably absent. Reynolds appeared at Michael's elbow. Everything okay here, sir? Perfect, Michael replied, watching as Linda worked the crowd, her laugh tinkling across the garden like broken glass. Everything's absolutely perfect. The grand hall filled quickly as more guests arrived, their excited chatter echoing off the high ceilings. Linda had positioned herself near the entrance, playing the gracious hostess to perfection. Michael watched as she greeted each arrival with practiced warmth, her smile never wavering. Linda, the house looks absolutely amazing, Barbara Henderson gushed, clutching her husband's arm. You must tell me who did your decorating. Oh, I handled everything personally, Linda replied, her voice modulated to just the right pitch of modest pride. Michael gives me complete freedom with the designing. Don't you, darling? Michael approached the group, noting how John lingered at the edges of the conversation. Complete freedom, he agreed, his voice sharp. With everything, the house, the money, the children. Linda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Michael's been so supportive over the years, she said quickly. Barbara, you must try the champagne. We had it imported specially. Imported? Robert Henderson raised an eyebrow. Must have cost a fortune. Only the best for our anniversary, Linda laughed. Though Michael's been quite concerned about our spending lately. Haven't you, dear? Just trying to make sure we have enough life insurance, Michael replied coldly. Accidents can happen so unexpectedly. John's champagne glass shook slightly, spilling a few drops on his expensive suit. Linda's eyes narrowed dangerously before she forced another laugh. Michael's developed such a strange sense of humor lately, she said, touching Barbara's arm conspiratorially. The stress of work, you know how it is? Speaking of work, Michael interjected, turning to John. How's that new offshore account working out for you? The conversation stopped abruptly. John's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Linda seems quite familiar with it. Don't you, dear? Linda stepped forward, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes blazing. Michael, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Nothing needs to be private anymore, Michael replied loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. We've had enough secrets, don't you think? Barbara Henderson looked between them uncertainly. Perhaps we should get some more champagne, Robert. As the Hendersons retreated, Linda grabbed Michael's arm, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. Just having a conversation with our guests, Michael replied, removing her hand. Isn't that what you wanted? The perfect anniversary party? You're drunk, she announced loudly for the benefit of those nearby. You need to lie down. I'm not drunk, Linda. I'm just finally seeing clearly. He turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. Would anyone like to hear what my wife's been up to with John Matthews? Stop this right now, Linda demanded, her composure cracking. Think about what you're doing. Oh, I have thought about it. For months. Michael's voice carried across the now quiet room. While you were planning my murder, I was planning this moment. The string quartet Linda had hired stopped playing abruptly. Guests froze with champagne glasses halfway to their lips. John took an involuntary step toward the exit, but found his path blocked by two large men who had seemingly materialized from the catering staff. Murder? Caroline, Linda's sister, pressed a hand to her chest. Michael, what are you talking about? Should I tell them, Linda? Michael asked, his voice dangerously calm. Or would you prefer to explain why you've been meeting John in secret? Why you've been transferring my money offshore? Why you doubled my life insurance last month? Linda's perfect mask finally cracked. You're insane, she spat. You have no proof. Actually, I do. Michael nodded to one of the disguised security officers who moved to the AV equipment. I have quite a lot of proof. Would you like to see it, everyone? Would you like to know who Linda really is? Michael, please. Linda's voice took on a desperate edge. Don't do this. Don't do this. Michael laughed harshly. Like you weren't going to do this to me? Tell me, Linda, how are you planning to do it? The sleeping pills in my drink? The tampered brakes on my car? Or did you and John come up with something more creative? John made another attempt to leave, but the security team held firm. This is ridiculous, he blustered. I'm calling my lawyer. Your lawyer's already been called, Michael informed him. The police outside made sure of that when they arrived. A ripple of shocked murmurs went through the crowd. Linda's composure shattered completely as she realized the trap she was in. You bastard, she snarled, all pretense of the perfect wife gone. You think you're so clever? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. Michael held up his phone. Thanks to this recording device I planted in your car. Would everyone like to hear Linda's true voice? Her real plans? Linda lunged for the phone, but Michael easily stepped back. Her designer heel caught on the expensive carpet she'd insisted on buying, sending her stumbling. The perfect image she'd maintained for so long, literally and figuratively, crumbled. You're going to regret this, she threatened, her voice barely recognizable from its usual melodious tone. No, Linda, Michael replied calmly. The only thing I regret is not seeing through your act sooner. But tonight, everyone will see the real you. He turned to address the stunned guests. Please, everyone, take your seats. The real anniversary celebration is about to begin. As the shocked partygoers moved to comply, Linda remained frozen in place, her carefully constructed world teetering on the edge of destruction. The string quartet, unsure what to do, began playing again, creating an eerily elegant backdrop to the unfolding drama. Think about the children. Linda tried one last time, her voice desperate. The children? Michael's voice was ice. You mean John's children? The ones you've been passing off as mine for years. Another wave of gasps swept through the room. Barbara Henderson's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor a sound that seemed to herald the imminent shattering of Linda's perfect facade. The night was young, and Michael was just getting started. The guests settled into their seats, an undercurrent of whispers rippling through the room. The elegant chairs Linda had specially ordered for the occasion now served as front-row seats to her undoing. Michael stood at the front, remote control in hand, while Linda remained frozen in place, her perfect posture rigid with tension. Before we begin, Michael announced, his voice carrying clearly, I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. Linda's always insisted on having the perfect audience for her performances. You're making a terrible mistake, Linda cut in, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. If you do this, you'll what? Michael interrupted. Kill me? Isn't that already the plan? He turned to the crowd. Would anyone like to guess how long my wife has been plotting my murders? Caroline, Linda's sister, stood up shakily. Michael, this is crazy. Linda would never play the recording. Linda's voice rang out suddenly, her tone challenging. Go ahead. No one will believe it anyway. They all know what you're like when you drink. Michael smiled coldly. Trying to gaslight me in front of everyone? That's always been your favorite trick, hasn't it? He addressed the crowd again. For years, whenever I questioned anything, Linda would suggest I was drinking too much, that I needed medication, that I was paranoid. Because you are? Linda snapped. Look at you now, ruining our perfect evening with these ridiculous accusations. Perfect. There's that word again. Michael pressed a button on the remote. Let's listen to your definition of perfect, shall we? Linda's voice filled the room through the expensive speaker system she'd insisted on installing. Everything has to be perfect, John. The timing, the method, the alibi. Once he's gone, we'll have everything. John's recorded voice responded, You've thought of everything. Beautiful. That's what I love about you. No one will ever suspect. The insurance policy is ironclad, Linda's voice continued. A tragic accident, a grieving widow, and enough money to last us a lifetime. The recording continued, detailing their plans with clinical precision. Linda's voice discussed methods, timelines, contingencies, all with the same attention to detail she'd used to plan this very party. As the recording played, Michael watched the color drain from Linda's face. She looked around wildly, like a cornered animal searching for escape. That's not real, she stammered. It's clearly doctored. Doctored? Michael pressed another button. The large screen behind him lit up with surveillance photos. Like these pictures of you entering John's house? Or the bank statements showing the transfers to offshore accounts? Or perhaps, he paused for effect, the DNA test results proving the children are mine? Barbara Henderson gasped audibly. The children? Linda, how could you? Linda's composure cracked completely. How dare you? She shrieked, lunging toward Michael. You miserable, pathetic. Two undercover officers caught her arms before she could reach him. She struggled against their grip, her designer dress ripping at the seam, her perfect hair coming undone. Let go of me, she demanded. John, do something. John, who had been inching toward the exit, found himself firmly gripped by another security officer. I don't know what she's talking about. He tried desperately. I never. Save it for your lawyer. Michael cut him off. The police have been recording your phone calls for weeks. They're particularly interested in your conversations about insurance policies and accident scenarios. The room erupted in chaos. Caroline fainted dramatically into her husband's arms. Barbara Henderson was openly weeping. Robert Henderson was on his phone, presumably calling his lawyer. You've ruined everything. Linda spat, still struggling against the officer's grip. Everything I worked for, everything I built, everything you built on lies. Michael corrected her. Did you really think you'd get away with it? That I wouldn't figure out the truth about the children? About the money? About your plans? The children are mine. Linda screamed. They were never yours. You were just the wallet, the respectable cover story. John and I. John and you what? Michael's voice was deadly quiet. Plan to kill me? Take my money? Raise my supposed children with their real father, using the insurance payout from my convenient accident. More gasps from the crowd. Linda's sister had recovered enough to shriek. How could you, Linda? Our parents trusted him with you. Trusted him? Linda laughed hysterically. They threw me at the first rich man they could find. But I found something better. John and I have real love. Real love. John's voice cracked. Linda, this is insane. I never agreed to murder. Liar. Linda turned on him, her face contorted with rage. It was your idea. You said if we could get rid of him, we could be together openly. You promised me. I never promised murder. John protested, looking desperately around the room. Yes, we had an affair, but I never an affair. Michael's voice cut through their argument. Is that what you call fathering my supposed children? Planning my death? Stealing my money? The evidence continued to play on the screen behind him. Bank statements, surveillance photos, recorded conversations. Each new revelation caused fresh waves of shock through the assembled guests. The police are very interested in all of this, Michael continued calmly. They're particularly curious about the offshore accounts, the life insurance policies, and of course the murder plot. As if on cue, uniformed officers entered the room. The undercover security team smoothly handed Linda and John over to them. You can't do this to me, Linda struggled as handcuffs were placed on her wrists. "I'm Linda Walker. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Michael replied coldly. "You're a liar, a thief, and a would-be murderer. And now everyone else knows too." The perfect anniversary party had become the perfect exposure of Linda's true nature. As the police led her and John away, her carefully constructed world lay in ruins around her. Shattered like the expensive champagne glasses scattered across the floor, Michael watched as his wife, the woman he'd thought he knew for 10 years, was led away in handcuffs, her designer dress torn, her perfect makeup streaked with angry tears. The guests began to leave in shocked silence, their whispers echoing through the mansion Linda had insisted on filling with only the finest furnishings. The perfect facade had cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. And Michael felt nothing but cold satisfaction as he watched it all crumble. The elegant party room had become a crime scene. Police officers moved efficiently through the space, documenting evidence and taking statements from shell-shocked guests. The string quartet had long since packed up their instruments, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by whispered conversations and the click of police cameras. Linda stood in handcuffs near the grand staircase, her perfect appearance now completely undone. Her expensive dress was torn at the shoulder, her carefully styled hair falling in disarray around her face. But it was her eyes that showed the greatest transformation. The calculated warmth had been replaced by cold, hard fury. "You've had your moment of triumph," she sneered at Michael. "Feel like a big man now? Humiliating me in front of everyone." Michael approached her slowly, maintaining a careful distance. "Humiliating you? Is that what you think this is about?" "What else?" she spat. "You couldn't handle that I found someone better, someone who helped you plan my murder?" Michael's voice was steel. "Someone who fathered my supposed children and conspired to steal my money?" Linda's laugh was harsh, unrecognizable from her usual musical tones. "Those children were never yours. You were just the fool who paid for everything. The big house, the private schools, the trust funds, all for my children with John." Nearby, Caroline gasped at her sister's cruelty. "Linda, how can you say such things? After everything Michael's done for you." "Done for me?" Linda turned on her sister. "He was my prison guard, always questioning the spending, wondering about my friends, checking the credit card statements. Checking the statements that showed you stealing from me." Michael interrupted. "The offshore accounts? The secret transfers? I deserved every penny." Linda's voice rose hysterically. "Do you know what it's like playing the perfect wife? The perfect mother? The perfect hostess? Always smiling, always charming, always making sure your precious reputation stayed intact. While you plotted my death," Michael added coldly. "Tell me, Linda, how are you going to do it? The sleeping pills you've been increasing in my evening drink? The tampered brakes on my car?" John, handcuffed and seated nearby, spoke up desperately. "I never agreed to murder. Linda, tell them. We talked about divorce, about leaving, but never." "Shut up." Linda screamed at him. "You coward. You promised me everything. A new life, freedom, enough money to never worry again. By killing me," Michael stated flatly. "The convenient accident, the grieving widow, the insurance payout. All perfectly planned, right, Linda?" A detective approached, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Walker, we'll need you to come with us now. We have some questions about those insurance policies and offshore accounts." "Don't call me Mrs. Walker," Linda snarled. "I've spent 10 years trapped in that name, playing the dutiful wife while sleeping with John." Michael finished for her. "While bearing his children and passing them off as mine, while plotting my murder." Barbara Henderson, who had remained rooted to her spot in horror, finally found her voice. "The children, all this time they weren't. How could you do this to them, Linda? To everyone?" Linda turned on her former friend with vicious intensity. "How could I? How could I not? You were all so easy to fool, so desperate to believe in the perfect marriage, the perfect family. None of you ever looked beneath the surface." "But I did," Michael said quietly. "I saw the real you, Linda. The lies, the manipulation, the cold calculation behind every perfect smile. You saw nothing." Linda struggled against her handcuffs. "You were as blind as the rest of them. If you hadn't gotten lucky with that DNA test." "Lucky?" Michael's laugh was without humor. I spent months gathering evidence. Every secret meeting, every hidden transfer, every whispered phone call, I documented it all. Your perfect planning wasn't so perfect after all. The detective gestured to his officers. It's time to go, Mrs. Walker. Mr. Matthews, you too. As they moved to lead her away, Linda made one final desperate attempt. Michael, please. Think about the children. They need their mother. The children will know the truth, Michael replied firmly. About their real father, about your lies, about everything. I won't maintain your perfect facade any longer. You'll regret this, Linda threatened, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. What kind of man exposes a murderous plot? Michael stepped closer, his voice for her ears alone. What kind of man protects himself from a wife who planned his death? Sorry, Linda, but your days of manipulation are over. The police began leading her and John toward the door. Linda's sister Caroline called out one last time. Linda, what happened to you? When did you become this monster? Linda's response was chilling. I was always this way, dear sister. I just played my role perfectly. Isn't that what everyone wanted? Perfection? As she was let out, her perfect world lay in ruins around her. The expensive decorations she'd chosen seemed garish now, the elegant furniture mere props in her elaborate deception. The last of the shocked guests began to leave, their whispered conversations already spreading the scandal that would destroy Linda's carefully crafted reputation. Michael stood in the emptying room, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once appeared to be a perfect marriage. Detective Reynolds approached, tucking away his notebook. We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow, he said. Make a formal statement about everything. Michael nodded. I'll bring all the evidence. Bank records, surveillance photos, recordings, everything. Hell of a way to spend an anniversary, Reynolds observed. Actually, Michael replied, looking around at the destroyed party decorations, the scattered evidence of Linda's deception. It's perfect. The perfect end to a marriage built on lies. As the last police officers left, Michael walked through the silent house. Everything that had once seemed so perfect, the artwork Linda had chosen, the furniture she'd selected, the photos of their supposed family now appeared as hollow, as the woman who'd arranged it all, the perfect facade had finally shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. But Michael felt no remorse, no regret. He had exposed the lies, revealed the truth, and emerged stronger. As he stood in the empty house that had been both showcase and prison, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Freedom, the perfect life, had been an illusion, but the truth, as painful as it was, had set him free. The morning sun crept through the windows of the police station, casting harsh light on the evidence spread across Detective Reynolds' desk. Michael sat across from him, his tie loosened, but his resolve as strong as ever. Walk me through the timeline again, Reynolds said, shuffling through bank statements. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The insurance policy was the first red flag, Michael replied, his voice steady. Linda insisted we increase the coverage to $5 million. Said it was for the children's security. That's when I started paying closer attention. Officer Martinez entered with fresh coffee, setting a cup in front of Michael. The lab confirmed the substance in your evening drinks, she reported. Definitely sleeping pills, gradually increasing in dosage over the past month. Building up my tolerance, Michael noted grimly. Making sure I'd be completely unconscious when they staged the accident. Reynolds leaned forward. Tell me about the children. When did you discover they weren't yours? Michael's jaw tightened. 3 months ago. Found some old medical records while looking for the insurance papers. Blood types didn't match. That's when I ordered the DNA test. And John Matthews was the father. Linda confirmed it herself last night, didn't she? Michael's laugh was without humor. Screamed it in front of everyone. 10 years of lies finally exposed. The door opened, and a suited man entered briskly. Mr. Walker? I'm James Morrison from the DA's office. We need to discuss your testimony. My testimony? Michael raised an eyebrow. I thought the recordings and financial evidence were clear enough. Morrison spread files across the desk. Oh, the evidence of conspiracy is ironclad. But Linda's lawyer is already spinning a defense. Claims you were abusive, controlling. Says she feared for her safety. Typical Linda, Michael said coldly. Always the victim, never the villain. What's John saying? Singing like a bird, Reynolds interjected. Claims the murder plot was all Linda's idea. Says she manipulated him, threatened to expose their affair if he didn't cooperate. But the offshore accounts? Michael pressed. The insurance policies? Morrison nodded. That's where it gets interesting. We've traced transfers going back 3 years. Linda and John weren't just planning your murder. They were systematically draining your accounts. Mr. Walker, a young officer appeared at the door. Your wife's attorney is here. Says Linda wants to make a deal. Michael stood straightening his tie. No deals. No compromises. She planned to kill me, stole my money, and lied about my children for years. I want her to face every charge possible. She's demanding to see you, the officer added. Says she has information you'll want to hear. More manipulation, Michael scoffed. That's all she knows. Reynolds exchanged glances with Morrison. Might be worth hearing what she has to say. Could strengthen the case. Michael considered for a moment. Fine, but I want everything recorded. No more private conversations with Linda Walker. They led him to an interview room where Linda sat, still wearing her torn designer dress from the night before. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, but her eyes still held that calculating gleam. Michael, she purred, attempting to sound vulnerable. Thank God you're here. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Save it, Michael cut her off, remaining standing. Whatever manipulation you're planning, it won't work anymore. Linda's facade cracked slightly. You think you've won? Destroyed my life? My reputation? You destroyed everything yourself, Linda. I just exposed the truth. The truth. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You want the truth? Those children you claimed to love? They never loved you back. They always knew something was wrong, that you weren't their real father. That's enough. Michael's voice was ice. You don't get to use the children as weapons anymore. They're my children. Linda slammed her hands on the table. Mine and John's. You were just a fool who paid the bills. Morrison entered, file in hand. Mrs. Walker, I'd advise you to stop talking without your lawyer present. My lawyer? Linda laughed hysterically. You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, we do, Michael interrupted. The evidence shows exactly what you're capable of. Murder, theft, fraud, quite a list, Linda. Her composure shattered completely. You ruined everything, she shrieked. Our perfect life, our status, our future, your perfect lies, you mean, Michael corrected her. It's over, Linda. No more manipulation. No more schemes. Just consequences. Linda's eyes narrowed dangerously. You think you can walk away? Start over? Those children will never accept you now. Everyone will always wonder if you really were the monster I claimed. The only monster here is you, Michael stated flatly. And now everyone knows it. He turned to leave, but Linda's voice stopped him. I never loved you, she spat. Not for a single moment in 10 years. Michael looked back at her one final time. I know. That's what makes you truly pathetic, Linda. You didn't just lie to me. You lived a lie. And now you have to live with the truth. As he walked out, Linda's screams echoed down the hallway, all pretense of refinement gone. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect socialite, all reduced to what she truly was. A cornered criminal facing the consequences of her actions. The mansion felt cavernous as Michael entered, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors Linda had insisted upon. Emma and Jack's voices drifted down from upstairs, where they were packing with their Aunt Caroline's help. The sound made his chest tighten. They're almost ready, Caroline said, descending the stairs. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. Michael, I'm so sorry. If I had known what Linda was planning. Did you speak with them? Michael interrupted. About everything? Caroline nodded, wringing her hands. They're confused, angry. Emma keeps asking about Linda, and Jack hasn't said a word since breakfast. Mr. Walker. Detective Reynolds appeared from the study, where his team had been gathering evidence. We found something you should see. In the study, Reynolds pointed to Linda's laptop screen. Hidden email account. She and John were planning to take the children to South America after your accident. New identities already arranged. Michael's hands clenched into fists. So the murder was just the beginning? The insurance payout would have funded their new life, Reynolds confirmed. Private school enrollments already arranged in Brazil under different names. Daddy? Emma's voice came from the doorway. The 11-year-old stood there clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with confusion. Are you really not my real father? The room fell silent. Michael turned to face her, his heart heavy. Emma, because Mom said you're not, Emma continued, her voice trembling. She called from jail, said you were lying about everything, that you're trying to hurt her and John. She called here? Reynolds demanded sharply. When? This morning, on Aunt Caroline's phone. Emma's lip quivered. She said we have to be brave because you're a bad man who... That's enough, Michael cut in firmly. Emma, your mother is in serious trouble. She's trying to manipulate you, just like she manipulated everyone else. But are you our real daddy or not? The question came from Jack, who had appeared behind his sister. At 9 years old, he looked so much like John that Michael wondered how he'd missed it before. Michael met their gazes steadily. Biologically, no. But I've loved you both and raised you as my own for years. Then why are you sending us away? Emma's voice cracked. Mom said you don't want us anymore, because we're not really yours. Caroline gasped. Linda said that? How dare she? Because it's what Linda does, Michael replied grimly. She twists the truth to hurt people. He knelt down to the children's level. Listen to me. What your mother did, the lies, the planning with John, trying to hurt me, that was wrong. Very wrong. But none of it is your fault. But where will we go? Jack asked quietly. Mom's in jail, and John is also in jail, Michael finished. They did bad things, and now they have to face the consequences. Emma's face crumpled. So nobody wants us? The words hit Michael like a physical blow. Despite everything Linda had done, despite the lies and betrayal, these children were innocent. They were victims of their mother's schemes just as much as he was. That's not true, he said firmly. Your Aunt Caroline and Uncle Thomas have offered to take care of you. They love you, and they'll make sure you're safe and happy. But what about you? Jack's voice was barely a whisper. Michael struggled to find the right words. How do you explain to children that their entire life has been built on lies? That their mother planned to murder their stepfather and flee the country with their biological father? I need time, he said finally, to deal with everything your mother did. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. Mr. Walker, Reynolds interrupted gently. The social worker is here? A woman in a sensible suit entered, carrying a folder. I'm Ms. Roberts from Child Protective Services. I understand this is a difficult situation for everyone. Emma clutched her rabbit tighter. We don't want to go with a stranger. You're not. Caroline stepped forward. You're coming to stay with me and Uncle Thomas, remember? We talked about this. But what about our house? Jack looked around the study. Our things? You can take whatever you want, Michael assured them. Your aunt's house has plenty of room. Ms. Roberts cleared her throat. Actually, we'll need to document everything before any items are removed. Standard procedure in cases involving criminal activity. The reminder of Linda's crimes hung heavy in the air. Emma started to cry, and Jack wrapped an arm around his sister protectively. I know this is hard, Michael said softly. But sometimes the truth hurts before it can heal. Your mother and John, they made very bad choices. But you two are strong, and you have people who care about you. Do you hate us? Emma's question was like a knife to the heart. Because we're not really yours? No, Michael's voice was firm. I could never hate you. What happened isn't your fault. None of it is. Caroline wiped her eyes. Come on, kids. Let's finish packing. We'll make your rooms at our house really special. Okay. As Caroline led the children upstairs, Reynolds approached Michael. That couldn't have been easy. Nothing about this is easy, Michael replied, watching the children disappear up the stairs. Linda didn't just try to destroy me. She destroyed our entire family. She's still trying, Reynolds noted. Making unauthorized calls to manipulate the kids. That stops now. Michael's voice was steel. Get a restraining order. No more contact until the court says otherwise. Those children have been through enough. Ms. Roberts made some notes in her folder. We'll need to arrange counseling for them. This kind of trauma. Already done, Michael interrupted. I found the best child psychologist in the city. Caroline will take them to appointments. You're doing the right thing, Reynolds said quietly. Giving them stability, protection, while their mother sits in jail for trying to murder me. Michael's laugh was bitter. Tell me, detective, what's the right thing in this situation? How do you explain to children that their mother is a monster? The sound of footsteps on the stairs silenced their conversation. Emma and Jack descended with their bags, Caroline following with more suitcases. The children paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking lost in the grand foyer their mother had decorated so carefully. Can we come back? Jack asked suddenly. Sometimes? To visit? Michael felt his throat tighten. We'll see. For now, focus on settling in with your aunt and uncle. They'll take good care of you. Emma ran forward suddenly, throwing her arms around Michael's waist. After a moment's hesitation, Jack joined her. Michael held them close, knowing it might be the last time. Be good, he said softly. Be strong. Remember that none of this is your fault. As Caroline led them out to her car, Michael watched from the doorway. The perfect family Linda had fabricated was breaking apart. But perhaps these children would have a chance at something real. A life built on truth rather than lies. The sound of Caroline's car fading away left Michael alone in the massive house, surrounded by the expensive trappings of Linda's deception. Everything that had once seemed perfect now felt hollow. Tainted by the truth of its origin, Reynolds appeared at his side. We'll need your statement about the unauthorized contact with the children. And there's still the matter of the offshore accounts. Handle it. Michael cut him off. Whatever it takes to make sure Linda can't hurt them anymore. She's taken enough from all of us. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as Michael arrived for the sentencing hearing. 3 months had passed since the night of the anniversary party, and Linda's perfect world had crumbled piece by piece. Mr. Walker, a reporter thrust a microphone toward him. Any comment on today's sentencing? Will you be asking for maximum penalties? Another called out. Michael ignored them, climbing the steps with determined strides. Inside, Detective Reynolds waited by the security checkpoint. Ready for this? Reynolds asked, falling in a step beside him. Been ready for months, Michael replied. How's she taking it? Not well. Had another outburst in holding this morning. Keeps demanding to speak with you. Michael's jaw tightened. No more conversations. She lost that right when she planned my murder. They entered the courtroom, where John Matthews already sat with his lawyer. He looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his confident swagger replaced by nervous fidgeting. He wouldn't meet Michael's eyes. Linda was brought in next, her designer clothing replaced by prison orange, her perfectly styled hair now limp and graying at the roots. She scanned the courtroom until she spotted Michael, her eyes narrowing. All rise. The bailiff called out as Judge Harrison entered. The proceedings began with the prosecutor summarizing the charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, grand theft, fraud, money laundering. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, bank records, witness testimony. Linda's own words from the anniversary party had sealed her fate. Your Honor, Linda's lawyer stood. My client wishes to address the court. Judge Harrison peered over his glasses. Mrs. Walker, you understand anything you say can affect your sentencing? I understand everything. Linda's voice dripped venom. She turned to face Michael. I wanted to hear this. Proceed. The judge allowed. Linda stood, her chains rattling. You think you've won, don't you? Destroyed everything I built? Taking away my children, my status, my life? You destroyed it yourself, Michael replied calmly. Every lie, every scheme, every betrayal, those were your choices. My choices? Linda laughed bitterly. What choice did I have? Trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who loved you. Michael interrupted. Provided for you? Raised children that weren't his? You're right. I was terrible. The children, Linda's voice caught. Where are they? What have you told them about me? The truth, Michael stated flatly. Which is more than you ever did. John's lawyer stood suddenly. Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement. Linda whirled on John. Don't you dare. You coward, you promised me. I promised a lot of things. John spoke for the first time, his voice shaking. But murder wasn't supposed to be part of it. The affairs, the money, even the children, that was bad enough. But killing him? That was all you, Linda. Liar. Linda lunged toward him, but was restrained by deputies. You plan it with me. All those nights, discussing how we do it, how we take the money and disappear. Order. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mrs. Walker, control yourself, or you'll be removed. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, this outburst only reinforces the premeditated nature of their crimes. Mrs. Walker and Mr. Matthews didn't just plan murder. They systematically destroyed a family. They stole Mr. Walker's money, lied about his children's paternity, and planned to flee the country with his supposed children after his death. Is this true? The judge turned to Linda. You plan to take the children abroad after your husband's murders? Linda's chin lifted defiantly. They're my children. I had every right to orphan them. Michael's voice cut through her justification. To rob them of their stability, their home, their entire lives. They would have had me. Linda shot back. Their real parent, not some fool who loved them. Michael finished. Who provided for them? Who put them first instead of plotting murder and theft? The judge had heard enough. Mrs. Walker, Mr. Matthews, please rise for sentencing. Linda stood, her chains rattling in the silent courtroom. Gone was the perfect posture, the calculated grace. Her mask had crumbled completely, revealing the bitter, angry woman beneath. Linda Walker, this court finds your actions particularly egregious, Judge Harrison began. You not only planned the murder of your husband, but systematically destroyed your family in the process. Your manipulation of your own children shows a level of callousness that this court finds disturbing. They're my children, Linda interrupted. You can't. Silence. The judge's gavel cracked again. You have forfeited any right to those children through your actions. This court sentences you to 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, with additional consecutive sentences for fraud and theft. Mr. Matthews, for your cooperation with the investigation, you were sentenced to 15 years. Linda's scream of rage echoed through the courtroom. You can't do this to me. Michael, tell them how you drove me to this. I didn't drive you to anything, Linda, Michael replied calmly. Your own greed, your own lies, your own choices led you here. As the deputies moved to lead her away, Linda's composure shattered completely. The children. I demand to see my children. They need their mother. No, Linda, Michael's voice was firm. They need truth. They need stability. They need love without manipulation. Everything you never gave them. Linda's screams followed her out of the courtroom, a far cry from the musical laugh she'd once used to charm everyone around her. John was led out separately, his head bowed. A broken man facing the consequences of his choices, the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving Michael with Reynolds and the prosecution team. It's over, Reynolds said quietly. She can't hurt anyone anymore. Michael stood, straightening his tie. The legal part is over. But the damage she did? That will take longer to heal. The children? Reynolds asked. Safe with Caroline and Thomas. In therapy, dealing with everything. They're strong. They'll survive this. And you? Michael looked around the courtroom one last time. I survived Linda's perfect lies. I'll survive the truth too. As he walked out of the courthouse, reporters again clamored for comments. But Michael had nothing left to say. Linda's perfect world of lies had crumbled, leaving only truth in its wake. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was real. And after 10 years of lies, real was exactly what everyone needed. 6 months after the sentencing, Michael stood in the empty mansion, surrounded by moving boxes. The real estate agent had just left, having confirmed that the sale was final. The house that Linda had insisted on buying, that she'd decorated with such calculated precision, would belong to someone else by the end of the week. His phone buzzed a text from Caroline. Kids want to know if you'll come to Jack's soccer game Saturday. Michael stared at the message, his throat tight. He'd kept his distance these past months, allowing Emma and Jack time to adjust to their new life with Caroline and Thomas. Their therapist had suggested gradual contact. Letting the children set the pace, the doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Detective Reynolds stood on the doorstep, looking more casual in plain clothes. Thought you might want to know, Reynolds said, stepping inside. Linda's appeal was denied this morning. The sentence stands. Michael nodded, unsurprised. And John? Still cooperating. His testimony helped freeze those offshore accounts. Your lawyers should be able to recover most of the money. Money was never the point, Michael replied, looking around at the boxes. Everything in this house, every expensive thing she insisted we needed, it was all part of her facade. Reynolds picked up a framed photo from a nearby box, the beach vacation where Linda had met secretly with John while claiming to need alone time. The kids are doing better, Michael said suddenly. Caroline says Emma's grades are improving, and Jack started playing soccer again. That's good. Reynolds set down the photo. And you? How are you doing with all this? Michael moved to the window, looking out at the garden Linda had insisted on redesigning 3 times. You know what the strangest part is? All those years, I thought I was living someone's perfect life. Perfect wife, perfect children, perfect home. Now I realize I was living someone's perfect lie. Mr. Walker? A voice called from the doorway. The movers had arrived, ready to clear out the last traces of the life Linda had fabricated. As the movers began loading boxes, Reynolds helped Michael gather the last few items from his study. They worked in companionable silence until they reached Linda's desk. Found something you should see, Reynolds said, holding up a small notebook. Looks like her planning diary. Michael took it, flipping through pages of Linda's elegant handwriting. Each entry detailed another piece of her deception. Meetings with John, money transfers, even notes about Michael's schedule and habits. She tracked everything, Michael noted, his voice hard. Every lie, every manipulation, all written down like shopping lists. Some people's perfect is other people's poison, Reynolds observed. The sound of children's laughter drifted in from the neighbor's yard, making Michael think of Emma and Jack. He pulled out his phone, rereading Caroline's text about the soccer game. They're not my biological children, he said quietly. Linda made sure I knew that. Threw it in my face every chance she got during the trial. Biology isn't everything, Reynolds replied. Those kids know who was there for them, who loved them without conditions or schemes. Michael typed a response to Caroline. I'll be there Saturday. Tell Jack to watch for me in the stands. You're a stronger man than most, Reynolds said. Some would have walked away completely after what Linda did. The children are innocent, Michael replied firmly. They didn't choose any of this. They didn't choose Linda's lies or John's betrayal. They deserve better than to lose everyone they trusted. A mover appeared in the doorway. Sir, we found a safe in the master bedroom closet. Need the combination? Michael followed him upstairs. The safe had been Linda's private storage, though he'd learned its combination months ago while gathering evidence. Inside lay more proof of her deceptions. Jewelry from John. Fake passports she'd arranged for her planned escape, documents detailing accounts he'd known nothing about. Take it all to Detective Reynolds, Michael instructed the mover. Every last piece. Back downstairs, the house was nearly empty. The expensive furniture Linda had chosen, the art she'd insisted they needed, the crystal and china she'd collected all gone, sold, or donated. The perfect showcase home she'd created was now just an empty shell. The new owners are a young family, Michael told Reynolds. 3 kids, dogs, planning to paint the walls bright colors. Linda would have hated it. Good, Reynolds replied simply. To Michael's phone buzzed again, a photo from Caroline. Emma and Jack at their school art show, both smiling genuine smiles. Not Linda's practiced, perfect smile, but real happiness. They're healing, Michael said, showing Reynolds the photo. Finding their own way. That's more important than any perfect image Linda tried to create. The movers finished loading the last boxes. Michael stood in the empty foyer, remembering the night of the anniversary party, how Linda's carefully constructed world had shattered on these marble floors. Ready to go? Reynolds asked. Michael took a final look around. The house seemed larger, empty, as hollow as Linda's perfect lies had been. You know what's funny? She spent 10 years creating this perfect life, this perfect image. But real life isn't perfect. Real love isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and true. He walked to the door, leaving behind the last traces of Linda's deception. The sunlight outside felt warm and real on his face. The kid's therapist says they're starting to understand, Michael said as they walked to their cars. Not just about Linda and John, but about what real family means. About truth being more important than perfection. And you? Reynolds asked. What's next for you? Michael thought about Jack's upcoming soccer game, about Emma's art show photos, about the real relationships that were slowly healing. Life goes on. Not perfect, not the way Linda planned, but real. Sometimes that's better than perfect. He drove away from the mansion without looking back. Linda's perfect world of lies was gone, replaced by something harder, but more genuine. The children were finding their way forward, learning to trust again. And Michael had survived it all. Stronger for having exposed the truth, the perfect facade had crumbled, but from its ruins, something real could finally grow.